Thank you everyone for joining. We are doing we're kicking off the second and final session of a mini web series where we're really trying to focus on the use of formative assessments with English language learners in a remote learning environment. We are joined again by several of our great educators and leaders who you saw during the first session. So a special welcome to Tara House, Dana Mitchell, Tess Simmons, and Emma Kohut. Thank you so much. And we know that you're incredibly busy. This is a particularly challenging time of the year. And so thank you everyone for joining and your interest in ELS and the formative assessment process in general. The agenda for today is we wanted to go ahead and build up from webinar 1. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Stephen.
Okay, go ahead. So welcome everyone. As Magda said, we're excited to be here. So just a couple of things that we're going to touch on today. We're going to touch base with a couple of things that we talked about and learned from our educators in webinar 1. Go ahead. And then we're going to ask all of you to actually engage in a task that you'll hear about. So by the end of the webinar, we're going to ask you to share some ideas and then eventually upload some of your notes, as you'll hear about in a minute. Go ahead. Again, like we did last time, we're going to hear from our educators, both teachers and administrators, in terms of what they're thinking about formative assessment within this PDSA cycle. Good. And we're going to share, we're not going to go over, but we're going to share some tools, protocols, and resources that folks can make avail themselves of when they're thinking about the kinds of tools they might use to analyze student formative evidence. We're going to spend the last 10 or so minutes in breakout groups where we're going to ask people to share kind of a pilot draft PDSA cycle so we can learn from each other. And then finally, we'll discuss briefly some next.
Get to see more or less kind of what we want to see happen in the classroom. So with this listen, interpret, and act process, you'll see over on the right-hand side, it's a
be better.
So I think what Jeff was saying is last time we listened to educators, both classroom instructors and administrators, talking about what focal inquiry question they were trying to address in working with students in remote settings. And we talked about this formative assessment process. Go ahead, Magda. So we were more focused last time on the classroom. Go ahead. And we talked about these as potential areas for considering in terms of what we wanted to gather evidence around, analyze, and learn from. So not just content, disciplinary thinking, and oral language and literacy, but also some of these other areas as well. Go ahead. Keep going, Magda. And so what we want to do in this webinar is really start to shift from just the classroom practice of the teacher engaging in formative assessment and moving to more of a systemic approach where teachers are working together, whether it's in PLCs, larger district meetings, states, etc., to learn using this PDSA cycle. Go ahead. So here's the task that you have for today. You have this PDSA organizer that we sent in advance, and I think we can put it in the chat as well. I don't know if it's in there now, but if it is, you should be able to download it. And you can do one of two things. You can print it out and just write on it, or if you want, you can use the electronic version. You should be able to type directly in there. So as you're listening and getting ideas throughout this morning, we're going to ask you to jot down, go ahead, Magda, any ideas you might use. You can steal, beg, borrow from our presenters, adapt. What you might think about in terms of what kind of student evidence you might collect And what are some big questions, these focal inquiry questions that you might want to explore, and what do you hope to learn from that? So throughout this morning, you're going to hear from our educators talking about those things, and hopefully those give you enough ideas to come up with your own draft plan. And then again, you'll share these ideas with us, both in breakout groups, and then at the end, we'll show you where you can upload these ideas. Okay. Before we move to hearing from our educators, I just wanted to share a piece that we're just going to briefly touch on today. This is this curriculum enhancement procedure. Last time we really focused on the individual activity level, and I wanted to give folks a procedure, a framework that they could use when thinking about how might they enhance lessons to embed formative assessment information, but at a larger level. So 3 to 5 day lessons, mini units. So briefly, this procedure, we have teachers thinking first about what are the learning goals, what's the content, the language, the disciplinary practices that they're focusing on. And then we have 3 curriculum enhancement principles that they can use to think about how are they going to enhance this lesson or unit. So just briefly, one is a sustained focus on disciplinary practices. So if you're, for instance, thinking about how do I improve my students' argumentation or reasoning skills, you really think carefully about how do you embed opportunities throughout a unit in a sustained way to help develop that skill. Another principle is scaffolding routines. So what are the structures in place that require students to interact with each other, to make meaning from texts, to develop academic uses of language? What are those structures, whether they're things like simple think, pair, share, stronger and clearer each time, information gap tasks like reading jigsaws that help support students and build on what they already know. And then finally, go ahead, Magda, sorry. Building on students' resources, the linguistic resources they bring and their peers bring, the knowledge and background experiences that they have. So with that, go ahead. Using those, enhancing lessons, using those, then creating opportunities to embed formative evidence collection, and then go ahead. And then thinking of all that together, then taking the original lessons, whether it was a lesson that a teacher created on their own or a publisher's curriculum, because no matter what, we know that the context of each teacher's classroom, whether it's in person or remote, can never be addressed completely by a set curriculum. So teachers are always going to have to enhance their lessons. So we'll include in the resources that'll be on the website that procedure and more information about that. So with that, let's move into our educators and what they're thinking about. So go ahead, Magda, and up the next one. So these are some of the questions that we gave our 2 teachers to think about. What's a question that they have in mind? What kind of formative assessment, what kind of evidence could they collect and analyze? Moving beyond the classroom, how might they work with their peers to learn from this evidence? And then finally, how can the system support this process? And why don't we have Emma talk through what she's working on in early literacy?
Hi all. So in the video, it was an example of a teacher giving a formal assessment for fluency in reading. So I'm going to speak specifically in the context of early education and reading and fluency. So as teachers, when we're assessing online, students might not have the materials or the books or the text in front of them. So how do we overcome that hurdle? One thing that I was thinking of was that during Zoom calls, you can share your screen and display the text of the assessment, and students can read it in a 3, 2, 1 countdown. And in that way, teachers can assess the fluency, the prosody, the intonation, and kind of begin to have a data set and running records of students' reading level. But moving backwards to the planning and the instruction piece, and specifically within fluency and reading, when I was teaching in the spring, I would have pull-out groups where I would group students based on their reading level, and we would read together a text. But moving forward, what I really want to push push other educators to think about is the type of comprehension questions that we're asking and engaging our students with in these breakout sessions. And something else we should think about is how we group students, if we're grouping them with their same English learner levels, or we're grouping them with other students who can kind of push their thinking, push their comprehension skills in that setting. So when we're talking about planning, we're talking about how can we support students virtually within Zoom and other ways, and how can we how can we assess students online with fluency specifically. So once we've kind of gathered that data and that running record, you can click through. When students have given us that data and we've assessed them, it's really, really critical that teachers are given the time to meet with their content area. So in this context, if it's reading and fluency or any other subject, or they're meeting with their grade level team to discuss and go over that data and analyze where there's area and room for growth with their students, and moving from that they're creating PDs that are PLC informed. So that what that means is that teachers are requesting the PDs that they need, and that also teachers are leading those PDs. So these PD opportunities are not just coming from admin or anyone from above who don't have experience teaching in the classroom, but that teachers are leading these PDs, that they are modeling how to assess students online, that they're modeling how to scaffold, differentiate, and support students when it comes to reading and fluency. Because if teachers are learning from other teachers and other educators, this is really going to support this collaboration and this cycle of inquiry. And what my ask would be is that districts all over California and all over our country are actually encouraging and incentivizing teachers to lead these professional developments. Teachers are already going to be overworked, but incentivizing financially that teachers step up and create these leadership opportunities to share their knowledge. I would really have that as an ask coming forward in the.
Yeah, it's a nice little video to see. So the text is on the left. This is coming from Tahoe Truckee School District. And just watch, the teacher and what she does in this online space, because her student will be reading to her, and they'll both have the text in front of them. And then if you want to respond at all, Emma, afterwards, connecting to what you said, that'd be great.
Thomas Edison inventor. You're going to go to page 204. So turn the page. And you're starting at chapter 1.
Young Edison asked lots of questions when someone told him, "I don't know." Tom had one more question. He asked, "Why don't you know?" He did lots of experiments to find out.
Oh, Stephania, that was beautiful. And I loved how in the quotation marks you changed your voice because someone was talking. Very nice.
So as you can see in this video, she was very encouraging, and that's a really critical piece for assessment and that one-on-one collaboration piece between teacher and student. And the student actually had the material in front of them. So if that is a hurdle, again, using a virtual platform for assessment, but this is also another option for assessing fluency and listening to intonation and prosody. But yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you. That's great. And now we're going to hear from the high school level, and Tess is going to share a little bit about what, in the looking ahead and the question that they are going to focus on in their setting.
Sure.
Take it away.
And you guys can hear me okay? Go ahead and put up all the bullet points at once. That's totally fine. So TTUSD and Stanford have been working together for over 4 years. Our principals, teachers, and coaches have been in this collaboration. So we've been already working on sentence frames with students for conversations. We've had teachers really focus on how to write prompts that elicit conversations, deep conversations in the classroom. Now we're to the point of students creating their own prompts, but by pulling information from the text and the world around them. Teachers have been analyzing the videos that the students have made in their PLC groups, and we also have taken those to whole staff meetings to analyze as well. And then our students have been analyzing their conversations on film as well. So when I think about the fall 2020 how do I want to set my expectations for my high school students? I might start a conversation that sounds like this, which I learned from Jeff. Good morning, class. I'm looking to see how your mind develops your ideas this year, how they mature and they change, how you articulate your ideas, and how your ideas build this year. Sounds pretty good, right? 8 years ago, I used to talk to my students about how writing was the key because you would be emailing your future coworker in Hong Kong. And now in 2020, I can definitely say that your speaking skills as a high school student are imperative because you'll be on a Zoom call with your coworker in Hong Kong. How I started off with my PLC group this summer is I showed them a variety of conversations that my students made in June of 2020. And then my PLC group watched those along with 2 district instructional coaches that work with the middle school and high school so that we could set ideas for where we want to go next with our speaking and listening skills, our conversation skills. My students were in groups of 3, and they recorded Google Meets entirely on their own and ran 20 to 30-minute discussions on their own based on a prompt of the Raisin in the Sun play and how it correlated to the riots that were started in June when it was actually my students' last week of school. Those conversations that were recorded were their final. My students had already written 7 to 10 page essays, and my PLC department is okay with the fact that a conversation or a oral discussion could be a student's final as well. When we look at writing skills with conversations, they really go hand in hand. So we want our students speaking to students in the classroom, their parents, people of different ages and professions. The more our students talk to different people, the more they're able to think about their ideas in their writing. So my PLC department is going to really focus this year on looking at the counterclaims that our students write and seeing if they have grown from the vast amount of information our students gather orally from other people. We're also going to look at their first and secondhand evidence in their writing. Hopefully, they don't just run to Google search engine for an article, but they actually embed these conversations into their own articles and essays that they write. I'm going to skip down to fortifying systems, and then I'll come back to AB schedules. When we were looking at fortifying systems for evidence, our PLC department at North Tahoe discussed the possibility of video collection. We were already doing that as the teachers, but could we actually switch this next year and put it more upon the student? So the student could watch a video of themselves like they've been doing and fill out a proficiency scale to show their growth. They've already been using Stanford graphic organizers to show their growth as far as looking at a conversation where they're talking at each other versus really building together. We then could have our students have a set of videos that they collect throughout the year, not only from the English department, but a conversation they had in science class, social studies, etc. And in June, our students could look over those portfolios of conversations and decide not only how they've grown, but choose a best of conversation video. And then in the fall of 2021, they could show it to their teachers the first week of school when they are setting their own goals for growth. If we have our 9th graders do that this year, by the time they're in 12th grade, they could have a collection of writing portfolios for 4 years and also conversations for 4 years that really demonstrate how they've built and thought and tracking their own ideas. So that is definitely a goal that we're looking at. My final point is going to be about hoping that we can be creative in fall of 2020, no matter the regulations that are thrown at us. So when looking at AB schedules, online learning, etc., here's a couple of thoughts for you. And in COVID, on Mondays, a lot of the teachers at my school were giving all of the assignments on Monday, every link, every instructional assignment, and then the students turn them in on Friday. That way they have all week to manage all of their work. Plus our students are working full-time jobs, etc. When I'm looking at Japan, they have already started school this fall, but some of their schools have had to go back to sheltering at home. Some have had to restart again. I will be using this pattern again in the fall of assigning everything on Monday and having it due on Friday so that no matter where we shift back and forth, I still have a pattern for my students that is consistent. Another one is in COVID. A lot of English teachers, we were a little bit frightened. Our schools were closed down and we didn't have time to give them novels. So is there a way to talk to licensure companies and whatnot about the text, and we could embed for a 10th grader on their Chromebook their science textbook, all the novels they'll be reading, etc. Just a thought. When we look at A/B scheduling, at some point, whether the schools in the fall are online or meeting in person, we will have to graduate students back in. And as a nation, one concept that has been talked about is having kind of an A/B split concept, where half of the students come in on Monday and half come in on Tuesday to limit the numbers. So how can we become creative rather than just simply reteaching instruction? If, let's say, a science teacher gave all of their instructions out on a Friday, the students could read ahead over the weekend. Therefore, on Monday, they're not wasting time hearing instruction. They're actually hitting the ground running and producing a lab. When the students come in on Tuesday, they are doing an entirely different lab, not the same as the students who had a lab on Monday. By the time Wednesday rolls around, that science teacher could assign an A and a B student to FaceTime each other and compare the differences of their labs. And then on Thursday, those two same students could get onto a Google document and write a final thought process about that, essay, lab report, what have you, or they could write them individually.
So Tess, what you're saying, are you saying that because they'll have different schedules, they'll get different things and they'll share with each other different information? So just making it a little more authentic, right?
Yes, yeah. So
I think that's a great takeaway, from almost taking advantage of the A/B rather than seeing it as a detriment. No, that's awesome. Thank you so much. That is great. We're going to move into a little bit different, a conversation this time.
Okay.
And Stephen's going to introduce that right now, I think, if he's on. Thank you.
Thanks.
That's awesome.
Thanks, Tess and Jeff. So now what we're going to do is we're going to hear from, and go ahead and you can advance the slide, whoever's controlling the slides, is a conversation between our two administrators instead of them presenting, where they're going to talk about their cycle of inquiry, their inquiry question, what they're thinking about for this fall. And so what Jeff's going to do is try and capture some notes as they have that conversation. And again, as the audience, consider what they're saying in terms of what might you use when you're thinking of your own draft pilot PDSA. So why don't we go ahead, and I think Dana, you're going to start the questioning and then we'll switch.
Sure. Hi there. Hi, everyone. Hello, Tara. It's good to see you. I was reflecting on our work over the last 4 years. Our districts have been collaborating. And so I'd really love to hear about your district's central question.
Yeah, thanks, Dana. So as Tess said, we've been working really hard on academic conversations, and our central question is still, how do we improve the quality and quantity of those academic conversations? And now with the possibility of remote learning and hybrid settings, what is that going to look like? So that's really our question.
And so how did you, what evidence did you gather to come up with this particular question? Did you have some evidence for that?
Yeah, so like Tess said, we had been collecting video evidence in the classroom, and then a lot of just formative assessment using conversation analysis tools. But what we're finding, one of the advantages of being remote is that students can record themselves and teachers can record meetings that they set up really easily. And now kind of the exciting thing is, like, district-wide and system-wide is leveraging those videos in PDSAs as that student evidence. So like one thing we've been doing all spring and now in the summer, we have a summer cohort too, is these pilot kind of PLC groups working with English language learners, and what is working, not working, as far as facilitating and setting up kids to have authentic conversations.
What do you think some of the barriers, especially when you think about remote learning, with having those authentic conversations, and what are your thoughts in terms of overcoming some of those barriers in that remote setting?
Yeah, it's interesting because some of the funny, interesting work about the PLCs that we've done so far has been around sometimes, you know, obviously in Zoom or these meetings, it gets a little stiff or awkward. And so we actually have to like teach the kids a little bit differently about how to communicate with each other. And that was like a big learning from spring and summer is, you know, teaching kids to hand off, for example, to other kids, you know, because they don't know when or how to talk. And, you know, we know that in person, they also need work on their conversations, right? But in digital, it's even more glaring. And then some of the things like the teachers I have given really great feedback. They have said like this, what we've been trying with this PLC pilot groups is just they've really liked it. It's been really helpful to look at those videos together. And I know Jeff has a clip. I don't know if you want to play that, but we have a little clip of one of our spring PLCs.
It's related, if you want to give a tiny bit of context, Tara, about, you know, it's related to what we saw in the last webinar as well. Right, it's based on the student, the teachers here were looking at the student version that we saw last time, right?
Yeah. So we saw that video of the two English learners having a conversation, and so this they're kind of all helping to come up with like, this is kind of the study, right? And what should we do next to make this, you know, even better?
Mm-hmm.
And Tara, one more question. How will you communicate before, during, after your PDSA cycles?
Yeah, so I mean, that's going to be the thing is we really want to get as many teachers on board in setting up these groups. What we know is in the spring, we really just didn't have time and energy to focus our PLC around student work as much as we normally would in person. And so we're hoping to roll this out in a way that makes it feel like this is something valuable to teachers and get back into using our PLCs in that way. And then this will fit into our overall district PDSA cycle where, you know, we're building on what we're trying to do in organizing these groups and leading these groups with the coaches and some of us administrators.
So I'll just show the clip really quickly, and you know, you can look for all of you out there can look for different insights on you know, how they were acting upon what they were studying, just kind of highlighting the two bottom pieces of the circle up there. And you can also keep an ear and eye out for ways that, you know, they were looking at fostering student agency as well.
Thinking about, you know, if we continue in distance learning longer, like how can we apply these same ideas to like a distance situation? And one of the things that is just coming to mind now, talking about the cards and the coding and things like that, is, you know, like potentially having a synchronous lesson that's going on and calling forward 2 or more students to have a conversation, but then asking the rest of the class, as those 2 students are having that conversation, to code the conversation. So maybe we all make cards together and we all have cards that say, you know, building up or whatever it is. And as those 2 students are having the conversation, the rest of the class is also looking for what they're doing in that conversation, kind of holding up their card or whatever. Like that could be the way to bring awareness.
An interesting idea.
I like that. Maybe having like a third person in the group, 3 people, and that third person is a builder, slides cards into place. That's kind of cool.
So I don't know if you want to just quickly review that, Tara, or then if you want to start asking Dana questions, just have a couple minutes left.
Yeah, so mainly with that, I think the exciting thing is like how engaged the teachers are in kind of adapting their practices to what needs to happen. And I know we're running short on time, so I don't know if we want to go back to Stephen.
Yeah, no, I think that because of time, and we want to give folks a chance to brainstorm some ideas and then share out. I think even getting your, Tara, what you're thinking of is a good start for people. We've heard from the 2 educators. So go ahead, Jeff. Let's go on to the next part in which we'll give folks some time to craft their own PDSA cycles.
Okay. Did you want to go over tools real quick?
Sure. Why don't you just briefly mention it?
Okay. Yeah. I'll just show you this. You know, I'm going to start, see how fast I can do this. New record. All right. So just this is going to be the very 30-second. These are some resources that are available. We just wanted to share them with you real quick. We wanted to kind of revolve them around the different things that we looked at, especially in the last webinar, the different things we're looking for that we're trying to develop in kids. So I just included all of these. Here's just 5 of the many tools that exist, some from different districts. Some have been tweaked from different tools that either we or other districts have made. It's sort of it's a big sharing party of how we adjust. And I just put arrows out. You could actually add a lot more arrows. I was noticing that, but I didn't want to over arrow it. So just showing you some of these tools that are possible, and feel free to go to the link that I think we'll provide at the end.
Yeah, we'll provide a link to these resources, and then when we have the web page updated with the session 2 materials, all of these tools will be in there as well. So now is the part where we're going to take a few moments to think about our own potential PDSA cycles. So before we give you a couple of minutes, a couple of ideas that we thought of in terms of, as you're considering what might be a focal inquiry question. Go ahead, Jeff. We just wanted to share a couple, not that these are the right ones, but some models. So thinking about improving students' mathematical reasoning, but in a slice in grades 3 through 5, or improving students' writing and science in middle school using online conversation, or the quality of students' argumentation skills in grade 9 English language arts in whether it's classroom or remote or hybrid setting. And one last question, how do we increase language use by increasing engagement and agency? So those are a couple of sample ideas we were thinking of. I don't know if they resonate with folks, but you can use those and create your own. And then go ahead, Jeff, maybe we'll share the other one. And then what we'd ask you to do is just to bullet a couple of notes in that PDSA organizer or on a piece of paper that you can talk to when we move into our breakout session. So one example could look like, we're going to collect videos of students in pairs that are focused on mathematical reasoning. And what we're going to do is we're going to either create or we're going to adapt one of the tools from Understanding Language for the videos and for written work so we can learn from that evidence. We're going to train a group of teachers to use those tools in virtual PLCs. And then finally, we're going to schedule monthly virtual meetings. So those would be some examples of planning notes that you could use. So with that, why don't we take 2 or 3 minutes to give people time to jot down an inquiry question and maybe a couple of ideas in terms of planning. And then in about 2 or 3 minutes, we'll break out into rooms of about, 5 or 6 people. And we'll share just what our nascent ideas are. And then afterwards, we'll come back together and talk about what were the larger learnings, the commonalities, and any questions that remain. So why don't we take, Sophia, why don't we give them another 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll break them out into groups.
Sure.
If you have any questions in the time when you're planning, feel free to put them in the chat.
Hello?
Hi, I think we're in our own room here.
Okay, and we have Kevin and Charity.
Charity, Kevin, Lupita.
Who else?
Looks like they...
Can you hear me okay? I'm outdoors and I think there's a lot of noise out here. Okay, I'm gonna stay on mute and, okay, all right.
You hear pretty well. And then Kevin, are you there?
I am, yes.
Okay. And Charity.
I'm here.
Oh, hi. So we have, I don't know if some of you are calling in or not, but we have Jeff, and Sophia. And what we just wanted to do is have you share just your initial possible draft question and some possible planning notes, even if this is like a model for, something you might share with districts. Does one of you want to start, Kevin, Charity, or Lupita?
This is Kevin. I'll just say that I'm really logged on to observe, so I did not go through that. I wasn't able to attend the first meeting.
Okay.
Kind of just checking this out. So.
Okay. What do you do?
So I am an accountability coordinator for the State Department of Education, and then I'm moving over to be the director for assessment and accountability.
Oh, cool.
After that.
Okay, that's awesome.
And I'm with Kevin as well. I did not participate in the first meeting. My role is I work at our local SELPA, and we have a grant that we're pushing out, English learners with disabilities. So my lens, my ear, is about how can we provide the accommodations and supports necessary for language supports as well as specific disability supports.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my lens.
So that's also a question, right? So that's a great central question. For now, who do you work with? Do you work with districts?
We work with SELPAs. The grant is primarily designed to support state SELPAs. Okay. And we're out of Imperial County. I'm not sure if anyone's familiar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So you would work with them and possibly engage in this type of cycle with them, right? And have, as you work together, you would come up with more specific plans, right? And more specific assessment data that you would gather, right? She must be outside. Okay, how about you, Charity?
I think I'm similar too. So I'm the director of assessment in Indiana, and this is my first time attending, so I missed the first session as well.
Mm-hmm. No, that's okay. The first session wasn't necessary. It was more to little more focus on the classroom. But now what we tried to do is we tried to zoom out a little more and emphasize these cycles of inquiry, particularly the formative assessment piece of the cycle of inquiry. So it's really, one of the goals is to figure out, well, what's the best evidence that can really help us improve instruction, right? That can move us, what's the best evidence to see learning and see growth, but what's the best evidence also to help us see how kids are growing. Right. And also to shape instruction, because, to tell you the truth, and I have everyone has their own opinion about instruction, but there's a lot of work to be done in making instruction more engaging and more relevant for students, particularly the students that we're most concerned about, right? And so again, some of you who, there's a lot of you at the state level, but you do work with districts, right? And so districts are the ones that I think, have a lot of power in shaping this, shaping and also choosing these types of cycles of inquiry, right? Because you could choose just, oh yeah, I just want to improve test scores. And so that means we just got to do test score, basically test-based curriculum, or we can go the other route. No, we're trying to develop the whole child, right? All 12 years. And so how do we do that, right? What are we looking for in terms of some of the things that you saw briefly, those ovals, I forgot how many, 8 ovals, but how do we improve, student agency, engagement, creativity, oral language use, conversations, which don't always show up on those multiple choice tests. So that's kind of one of the purposes of this webinar, is to really kind of expand people's notion of what it means, to assess. I don't know if anyone else has any kind of other questions that you're trying to explore, or the needs out there, any other needs that need to be addressed in your state. There's only really 3 of you, so.
I think one of the things, just thinking about the start of the school year, is which I know is in the forefront of a lot of people's minds, but just the level of diversity that we have in our state, and also some of our most urban environments are still considering the virtual administration. Just knowing some of those equity concerns and accessibility, just trying to maintain that level of engagement when it's very hard to have all of those students online. So it's just one of those things that I think a lot of people are grappling with here, is how to engage when the system isn't really set up to have a great level of engagement, and how to solicit information when there's problems with access.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we're, these two short webinars, these two one-hour webinars, we don't, you could have a whole series, a separate series on how to address those more structural issues, right? And access issues, and particularly around technology, right? So we're essentially, we're assuming that some device is possible. And most of the time it's better if it's, if there's a video facing device to work with kids. But yeah, one of the challenges, and one of the big questions that you saw over and over was how do we maximize learning and development, including social development and language use in an online space, right? And so, I think in the first one you might have seen the two girls using a cell phone or something like that. So there's different ways around it, but I know not everyone even has cell phones. So that's one of the challenges that comes up. Is there someone else? Oh, Magda's here. Hi. Okay. So any other insights from Kevin or Lupita? Because we might want to try to share an insight at the end here.
Yeah, no additional insights from me. I think Charity's comment is what we're looking at the state level, as well as, as we return in the fall, how do you deal with this for the systems that weren't necessarily designed to work that way. So I'll be interested to go back and look at that first one. You mentioned the kind of example of using cell phones to sort of share some of that information across. So no insights other than just glad to be learning a little more. So.
Yeah, there's the challenges that come up. We come up with a lot of these, not only the challenges, but we're trying to also, how do we, like Tess mentioned a little bit, how do we leverage some of the things that we have to do, like the A-B schedule, kids aren't coming every day, and there's two groups of students. How can we turn that into somewhat of an advantage, which is another, and someone else mentioned, I think, well, there's a lot more recording of student oral language happening as well. So we're also trying to take advantage of that rather than just, just all the time kind of consider ourselves in an uphill battle, just focusing, being overwhelmed by the challenges. There are a couple of things that we can try to leverage, I guess is probably the best way to put it.
I think that's framing to keep in mind. Like, I enjoyed that A-B idea of using that as an opportunity there. And the same thing with the recording is it can be very easy to just see it all as a challenge, but there are some real opportunities, and we should always keep that in mind and see what we can take advantage of with the current structure that might not have been available under a more traditional setting.
Yeah, and even you guys didn't hear much from Tara's summer program, but she's running a summer program where basically the kids had a choice between choosing to design a zoo of the future or write a short story, write a children's picture book. And so those were their projects, and around them, there was a lot of different things they had to do to prepare themselves, with the knowledge and some of the skills for writing, illustrating, in the story, and with the zoo project, just discovering about animals, right? Reading up about animals and having discussions. So even that type of, it's almost like a project-based curriculum, but it's some of the teachers have commented, like, I want to do this during the year, you know, in my regular classroom as well. I'm seeing the advantages of engaging kids. So I mean, it's taking this this online challenge, and it's kind of turning it, and hopefully, ideally, you know, we can. I think, can we improve curriculum? Can we improve teaching practices so we're not just again, we're not just kind of hitting the surface all the time, having kids memorize and then, you know, forget 3 days later. You know, how do we make this a richer process, a richer curriculum, and I would say richer assessment? You know, how do we create, a lot of times we don't have a lot of choices in the assessments that we're giving kids, but how do we eventually influence, I would say, you know, assessment, formative, summative, interim, diagnostic, right? How do we shape that so it's you know, not only useful for us but useful for kids? So I know I've been talking a lot, but I don't know if there's anything resonates from that. We're almost, I think we got, I don't know, do we have much time left, Sophia? Okay, so just before the 1 minute mark, any final both either challenges, questions, comments?
Well, I was just going to add with what you were just saying that I think the environment that we're in now forces us to be a little bit more flexible than what we may have been before. Mm-hmm. So where we would approach days, I mean, I'm thinking back to my days as a classroom teacher of having very scripted lesson plans and so forth. I mean, that's just not really the world that our teachers are coming back into at this point. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so like true. Our typical startup of the school year and knowing right where to start, like they're just not going to have that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. How do we in a way, I mean, I'm like, how do we take advantage of that flexibility to improve, right? To improve mm-hmm. and to make things better for students. Yeah, I agree. Mm-hmm. I think that would be maybe a good takeaway that we could share. Well, thank you guys. For all your work and for the insights.
It just gave another 1 minute.
Well, I'm just gonna move into number 3, which is, does anyone have any kind of, you know, quick, concise insights that they got from listening to their colleagues and in the breakout groups?
I would like to volunteer Gabriel from our group. He had an awesome comment. Gabriel, do it.
If he doesn't mind.
If he doesn't mind, yeah. I asked him.
All right, yeah, no, thanks, Dana. So we were discussing the fact that as a question is how does one provide those integral student-to-student conversations, especially when you're looking at, you know, the New American community, when so putting it into perspective, you know, a lot of the school districts, including the one that I live in, has announced that they have gone into a hybrid model with 2 days in school, 3 days not in school buildings. And for the New American students that we have here, they're going to be in their homes. So they're not going to be out and about. And so how do we facilitate the ways that those students can be having academic and not academic conversations with their peers that develop their new language acquisition skills? Because it's so integral that they're getting the practice, not just the instruction. You know, I think Dana made a comment about we're not trying to go to as we go online, we don't want it to be just a straight teacher to student pipeline where you're just kind of giving information, but you want to be able to provide those times of back and forth, not only between the student and the teacher, but also between students. And one thing that I saw this past year with my son who was in kindergarten is that there was a once a week group class meeting. And that was the only synchronous time that students actually talked to the teacher or talked to each other. And it was almost always just speaking to the teacher. Mm-hmm. So,
that's a great focus.
Think about those students.
Yeah,
thanks.
That's wonderful. No, thank you. Yeah, and I'm going to wrap it up. Just before I wrap it up, I do want to share a tiny bit from our group, which just about 5 seconds. We looked a lot at how can we, you know, turn things around and take advantage of the opportunities that this online remote learning might provide in terms of assessment and curriculum, right? So, looking at, kind of like Tess mentioned, the A-B schedule, taking advantage of it rather than, so kind of doing both what Gabriel said, and both how do we take advantage of some of these differences and some of the flexibility that might exist now with this space. So finally, just this last slide, and I'm sure there are many other insights that we didn't hear, but we would like you to share some of those insights, plans, PDSA ideas with us, and then we will actually gather them together and share them with you guys back. So kind of in a way, we're a little bit like a PLC in that we are, gathering our thoughts, our knowledge, our ideas together, and we'll also share them with it. There's a lot of great stuff out there that we never hear, and so hopefully this will be a small chance to do that. So there's the URL is up there for just uploading into that folder some of your PDSA cycles, whether you want to take a picture of it or if you've already written on it on the computer or handwritten, whatever. Everyone could take advantage of that. And then next step, we just collaborate with others to improve the PDSA cycle. You can add and or check out, adapt the tools that you saw, that one slide of tools on this, and I'll leave this up for a little bit. And it should be in your PDF. And then finally, just engage in a cycle. This might take a while. It could take a month, 2 months, a whole year. But ideally, we would you could share it with us in the end. Where we live, or at least our emails are, and you can get a hold of us, and then we could even share out later on, maybe 3 or 4 months down the road, we could share out again what's happening. So it would be nice to connect back and see what's happening. I don't know if Stephen has any final comments.
No, I think it's great. Since my group had people more at the sort of state level, if you came up with notes, ideas that don't fit into the PDSA cycle, that's fine. Just a short, Google Doc or Word doc or something with ideas, that's fine as well. So because we're really interested in capturing what people at all levels of the system are thinking around this.
Yeah. And with that, I thank you so much for your participation. We hope you got some things out of it. Feel free to, if you have some more questions or comments or need something, we're here for that too. All right, any final things, Sophia?
No, we'll post those also on the remote learning website, so everyone should be able to access those too.
And the video, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, great. All right, well, good luck out there. Don't work too hard or too softly. And,
thank you, everyone.
We'll talk soon.